black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Well, I appreciate you being here. And you actually had 2 encounters, correct, Jeff?
Yes, I've had 2 encounters with Sasquatch and something else that I really don't know what it was. So.
All right. Well, I'm really curious to hear your encounter with Sasquatch. I've actually heard this behavior before, but if you would, I'll let you take it away. Kind of tell us what you were doing, and walk us into what happened, if you would.
All right. Well, it was back in 2008, and I remember specifically it was in January, and it was about midnight. I'm a bit of a night owl, so. I had to take my dog out, try to get it to go out the door, and this thing would always go out by itself normally. I could just open the door, let it go, and it'd go do its thing. Rain, snow, sleet, or hail, it didn't care, it'd do it. But as I started watching the dog, it kept coming back to the door, wanting to come back in. It would not go by itself. It was acting scared, so I went and grabbed a leash, and I walked it and took it out into the yard pretty good ways, and it was a cold night. There's 3 inches of snow on the ground, and just walking the dog, just trying to get it to do its business, but it kept acting like it was scared. One thing about where I live at, where we lived at the time, it was back in a holler where there was nothing. There's not even a speed limit on this road. There's no road marks or nothing. There's just very few houses, and I grew up hunting and just living out in the fields and the woods all around the area. So, I pretty well knew all that we had around the area. We have bear, deer, bobcat, the occasional mountain lion. I pretty much knew everything we had. But this night, I'm out there watching the dog, trying to get it to do its thing, and I'm out there standing out in the front yard. And all the neighbors, they've got dogs as well. They're always barking at everything they can. But I noticed that night it was absolutely quiet outside. Dogs weren't even barking at all. And I started to notice that there was an odd smell in the air. It's a full moon night, absolutely full moon, and it's just beautiful evening. But I noticed there was a smell that I had never smelled before. I've been upon bear. I've come upon bear that it was a fresh kill. I've come upon animals that have been rotten for a while too. I've never smelled anything like it. It was extremely musky and very, very pungent, almost as if it was something that had almost as if you had an old fur coat that you just left locked up in a very moist room forever. So I start to listen around, and I noticed that I could hear this walk. It was a heavy step and a drag, like something was walking through the snow. And it sounded at first to me like something was walking through the snow silently or slowly, more not silently, but it sounded like it was moving really slow. And so I turned around, and I'm facing towards the house, and back behind the house is this 19-acre field that just goes pretty much straight up a hill. And I'm listening for it, and I could tell immediately that this was a noise that I'm not used to. It didn't sound like the neighbor's horses. It didn't sound like the cattle had got out or anything. From what I could tell, it was something on two legs walking. And so I just started watching. You know, it's a full moon, 3 inches of snow on the ground, so it's lit up pretty bright. And that's when I seen it. I looked up and I seen this huge figure come out from behind just a small cuddle of trees there, and this thing was 7-8 foot tall, absolutely massive, and it was taking huge strides. And for what I thought was actually a slow step, it was actually a very, very quick walk for this thing. And it had extremely long arms. The arms hung down below the waist, and they were swinging by its side, and you can see in its movement that it had fur. This thing was covered in fur, and you can kind of see it moving. You know, I've talked to several buddies of mine, and I've always said, you know, it's a type of animal. I believe that they have a winter coat too that's usually a little bit longer than their summer coat. You know, anything with fur does that. So I started watching this thing, and I noticed, you know, it had a very conical shaped head, very big, very massive, and I was like, this is a Sasquatch. And so I was watching this thing, and it's moving across about a 200-yard flat. You know, it's got 200 yards from where it came out when I first seen it to the tree line where it goes into the woods. And I see this thing, and I just stop and I look, and I was froze. It wasn't frozen terror, but it was excitement. I didn't want to scare it away. But when it got to about the middle of the field, I decided I was just going to whistle at it. I just wanted to see what would happen. And so I kind of let out a low whistle, just a real low, short whistle, and this thing stopped, and it started looking around, and you can see it look up the hill first, and then it turned around and looked back down towards me. And it just stopped and just started staring at me. And, you know, I was mesmerized by what I was seeing. And whenever, well, you know, we stood there looking at each other for about a minute or two, and I kind of slowly raised my hand up. I raised my hand in the air. Just kind of didn't even really wave. I just raised my hand. And after about a minute of doing that, this thing raised its hand up in the air looking at me as well. I mean, it just raised its hand straight in the air like it was mimicking me. I put my hand down, and I'm shaking all over. I'm excited. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then it just turned and started heading straight back for the tree line, and it went right over to the tree line, and there was a 4-foot-tall barbed wire fence all around the property, and this thing stepped over it like it was nothing. I mean, it stepped over the fence, and it went straight into the tree line of the woods. And that's when I reached down, picked up my dog, and took off running as fast as I could towards the house. You know, the tree line came down right beside right beside our house and everything. So once I lost sight of it, I was like, I'm getting inside, and I took off running, and everybody was asleep, and I'm waking them up like, you're never going to believe what I just seen. And, of course, nobody did. They all told me I was just crazy and that I needed sleep. But I know without a shadow of a doubt what I seen that night.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice there was so much snow on the ground. It's almost like daylight at night when there's snow on the ground, you know, especially if the moon's out and everything.
Yes, I mean, and it was, you know, it was a full moon night, so it was lit up. I could see everything well. I mean, you couldn't really tell. It looked almost as if it was like a dark gray-black color, you know, but of course it is at night and kind of hard to tell, but it was massive from what I could see, and it was amazing, and I got addicted to it after that. So.
Yeah, how did your dog react when it stopped and was kind of looking your direction?
It was terrified. The thing had wrapped its leash around me, pretty much, and finally huddled down on the ground. It was being submissive is what I would say. It laid on the ground and just laid there as if, you know, when an alpha dog comes up to it, it's going to be submissive and lays down and shows its belly. That's what this thing did. I mean, it was hiding behind me, but it laid on the ground, showed its belly, but you could tell it was terrified.
Did the creature ever vocalize or anything at you?
No, it never did. I never heard any, couldn't even hear the thing breathing. So, I mean, it was moving on pretty quick. You know, I don't think I could even run as fast as this thing could walk.
Yeah, Can I ask you real quick? I'm sorry to interrupt you. The appearance of it, was it more man-like, or would you say it was more ape-like, or something different?
I'd say it was more man-like. I mean, it stood up straight. It had a, very long arms, but it had a very broad barrel chest, but it slimmed down. It wasn't very thick. It was lean. It was a lean creature. You could tell this thing is designed for the wood life. It could go in the trees without any problem whatsoever, but it seemed more man-like. The only difference was, the size and the fur all over it, and then the shape of the head. I mean, very conical shaped head. It looked like a gorilla walking around with a giant man's body.
Yeah, the encounter fascinates me. I had a hunter tell me a very, very similar story. He was out hunting and he thought he saw a guy in a ghillie suit, and he whistled. Just to, hunters do that when they come across each other in the area, kind of like how you did. And he put his hand in the air just to say, "Hey, I'm over here." And he said this thing put its hand in the air, and he realized it wasn't a man because the arms were so long when it put its hand up. It made me wonder when he was telling me his encounter if the creature was trying to mimic a human or to kind of throw someone off. I mean, I couldn't understand why it would do that. And I remember I was so confused by it. In your own encounter, what do you make of that behavior?
I mean, I almost felt like it was kind of trying to mimic the human behavior, because it stood there for a minute before it raised its hand. It didn't immediately do it as soon as I did it. It's like it took a minute or two to realize what was going on, because I still had my hand in the air and it did it. And and I almost wondered if it was, because we hunt. Everybody on that road hunted all the time. So we were out there shooting, and I don't know if it's seen us out there hunting and shooting deer. I mean, we'd go out and shoot the deer right off our back porches if they was close enough. I felt more like it was trying to mimic, trying to blend in, almost as if it's like, well, I'm out here in the open, so maybe if I make myself look more like this thing, it'll leave me alone.
Did you ever go back and look for tracks the next morning?
I did. I went back the next morning to try to find prints from it, and unfortunately it had snowed again during the night. And so when I went out the next morning, there was about 5 inches total on the ground. But I went up to where I seen the creature walk across the field at, and there were ruts. It couldn't find any visible footprints, but you could see where ruts were, because, I said earlier, it sounded like a heavy step and a drag, almost as if this thing wasn't picking its feet up in it all the way as it was walking. But these 2 ruts were exactly where I seen this creature go, and they were about 3 foot wide, 3 foot apart, and I followed it from the tree line where it disappeared at all the way up to my neighbor's house, and then on past on into the field even more, and then to another tree line. And I mean, honestly, it looked like a 4-wheeler went through there, but there was no visible footprints from what I could see, but there was 2 ruts where you could see where something had walked through the snow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it was sounds like it was passing through.
Right. I mean, and I had never encountered anything like that before. I mean, and I've been in them woods and all over that field where I can't even tell you how many times. But it was pretty amazing just to see it. I don't know if it was passing through or not.
And how big do you think this thing was? I know you saw it from a distance, but how big would you say it was?
I would say about 7 to 8 foot tall. I mean, at the time I was 6 foot tall, and now I'm 6'4" now, 250 pounds, and but that night I remember distinctly that, I mean, and there was saplings all around it. These little saplings were only about 6 foot tall, about as tall as I was when I got up to them the next day, and this thing was about another 2 to 3 foot taller than the saplings were.
Yeah, that's a fascinating count, especially its reaction to you putting your hand in the air. Again, I've heard that before, and I've heard it very few times, but I've heard it before, and I just find that behavior really fascinating. Tell me about your second encounter.
It was a lot like the first, but this one was actually farther on away from our house. A buddy of mine who I was hanging out with, him and his dad had been having some trouble with something messing with their dogs at night. they called me one day and he's like, we need you to come over to our house if you don't mind and hang out with us for the night. He said, there's something that's been messing with our dogs. He said, we just need an extra set of eyes and ears and an extra gun just in case it's a bear. And I was like, all right, I'll come and hang out with you. And my buddy, they lived over close to a dam over here where we're at in Tennessee. And their house is just a single wide trailer up on the top of a real tall hill and pretty much secluded all by itself. And they said it was just odd that something was messing with them. But their dogs, they said the odd thing was their dogs were afraid. They had a bunch of pit bulls that they had raised from puppies to go bear hunting with. And that's what these dogs were for. They were bear hunting dogs. And these dogs, they said they kept acting terrified. They said every night, something would mess with them and they would just be terrified. And so we go up to my buddy's house and I'm up there with him. And it's getting to be about 1 o'clock in the morning. We had been outside. We've been waiting and watching. We hadn't seen anything. So we went in the house. And we were all just kind of hanging out. My buddy, he's like, hey, I got some new guns I want to show you. So we went to his room, and he was showing me some of his new guns. He got some new shotguns and stuff he was wanting to show me. And we were just sitting there, and all of a sudden you could hear the dogs barking. All of a sudden they went completely quiet. And we got quiet, and we just started listening. And all of a sudden, something hit the side of their trailer so hard that it literally rocked this trailer. It's a single wide trailer. It rocked the trailer on its foundation. I mean, it hit with so much force. And we grabbed our guns and we took off running out of the room. And his dad came running. We all met in the living room of the trailer. And he was like, did y'all rock the trailer? And like, that wasn't us. He said, well, something's outside. So we took off running outside through the front porch, and we took off running, and we started going around the house. And we got to looking around, and one of the dogs was gone. Could not find one of the dogs. It was amazing. It freaked us all out because we shined our lights. We had some pretty bright headlamps on, and we shined the lights on the trailer. And up about 2 foot above my head, there was a dent in the side of the trailer. Pretty significant dent. And I asked them, I said, was that there before? And they said, no, that wasn't here. Something just did that. Whatever that was just dented the trailer. The dog that was gone had a chain that the dog was tied to. And the chain was snapped clean off. And we're standing there and we're waiting. And all of a sudden the dog comes running from around the front of the house back to us, and it books it straight into its doghouse. We were like, okay, that was odd. The dog just come from the front of the house. So we take off towards the front of the house, and we're standing there and we're just looking, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. We was just trying to see just something. And there's 3 of us out there. We've got our rifles. We're all ready to shoot, and I love listening to your show. And I listen to the one where don't point a weapon at it. And I think back now, we might have been pretty dumb to hold those rifles in our hands, but we're just kind of watching and looking around. Well, about maybe 50 yards from their trailer, they had an old metal awning carport that had sides on it. And we're just kind of looking, and the back of their car stuck out from the inside of this carport. And all of a sudden, we see the back of his dad's car raise up in the air, almost as if something was leaning against the hood and causing the back end to lean up, to raise up. And so we start walking down that way towards it, and I looked at my buddy. I said, listen, I don't know what this is. I said, but this could be something that we don't want to be messing with. I said, and he's like, well, what do you think it is? I said, I don't know. Well, then all of a sudden we got a smell. We could all of a sudden distinguish a different smell in the air, and his dad goes, is that one of you all smelling like that? And we're like, no, that ain't us. And I was like, I've smelt this before. And they're like, what? I said, yeah. I said, I seen Bigfoot once before. I said, and this is exactly what it smelled like when I seen this thing. So his dad starts laughing. He goes, yeah, you're a fool too. His dad was probably 70 years old, and he just called us a fool. And my buddy goes, you really think that's what it might be? I said, well, that's what it smells like. I said, don't smell like no bear. And his dad said, well, no, it don't. He said, that's why I'm asking. Well, we get down to the car, and this thing's gone. We never even heard it disappear. And we get down and we're looking in the carport, and on the hood of his car, the hood was dented in, where you could tell something leaned against it, but it was dented in. And his dad's like, that wasn't like that before. He said, whatever this is, it's heavy. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably an 8-foot tall Sasquatch. It's going to be heavy. And we walked around for maybe 20 minutes and never seen a thing. We shined our lights around, hoping to see maybe some eye shine or something. We never seen it. So we finally go back to their trailer, and his dad goes on. He goes, I'm going to bed. He said, I'm tired of this. Well, man, as my buddy, we stayed out on the front porch, and we just sat there. We sat there for about 30 minutes, and all of a sudden we heard gravel start shuffling. You could hear something walking on gravel. And we both stand up, and we're looking around, and I look going down the drive, and right in the middle of the driveway, maybe 100 yards from us. We had some pretty bright lights, but, it was starting to get dim. Right in the middle of the driveway, our lights hit the Sasquatch. And I'm getting cold chills thinking about it, because we know we was just down there. We was just close to where that was at. And, we knew there was nothing in the middle of this driveway. And then all of a sudden, here's this huge figure. And this one was about gray, brownish colored, and it was massive. You could see it. I told my buddy, I said, I want to stand here with my light on it. I said, go get us a brighter flashlight. And he comes back with a spotlight, and we light this thing up, and we can see it in its entirety. And we just stand there, and we're mesmerized. And he's all excited, and this thing's just staring at us. And, from 100 yards, it's hard to distinguish facial expressions, but you can tell this thing was squinting because we had the light shining on it. It was staring at us like it was trying to figure out what we were, or what we were doing. And we had the same expressions on our face, like, what the heck is this thing? And we stood there for a little bit, and I said, hang on, I want to try something. And I raised my hand in the air again. And my buddy's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, watch, just watch. And I stood there with my hand in the air for about 2 minutes, and then this thing raised its hand in the air, held it for about a minute, and then you could just hear a snort, like it let out a snort of air, just, and then lowered its hand and then took off running into the forest. It didn't just walk, it ran. And, you can call him, and to this day, he'll still tell you the exact same thing that we see.
Yeah, that's fascinating about the behavior. Do you think it was the same one you had seen before, or do you think it was a different one?
Honestly, I wondered if it was the same one. I honestly thought that it was, because, they didn't, where my buddy lived at, it was maybe 15 miles from my mom and dad's house. And where my mom and dad live at, it's along the same river there. It's, the same river that runs up past their house and onto the dam that's right there at their house. And we waited, and I told him, I said, I think that was the same one because it mimicked my movement. And I said, I think that was the same one. It was just as big, had the conical shaped head and everything, but I was able to see it in more detail this time because we actually had a light to shine on the thing. But this second one, that was in 2010, but, that went from 2008 to 2010. So, I wondered if it was the same one, but then again, I thought maybe it's a different one. I really don't know.
Yeah. Can you describe any details that you remember from that night as far as what it looked like? I realize you probably didn't get too much of the face, but can you describe for the audience what you saw?
It was very man-like. Once again, it was man-like. It had extremely tall, maybe 7-8 foot tall. It's hard to judge, within a foot of distance there, but just massive. This thing had a huge broad chest on it again. It was very lean, though, very lean, but you can tell that this thing was powerful. And we just stood there and just stared at it. From what we could tell, though, there wasn't very much fur on the face, because we could see its eyes. It was squinting at us. You could see it squinting from that far away, but you could tell there wasn't as much fur on the face. There was a grayish colored skin on its face, and you can see the hands and the feet, and you could see the color of the skin. And this time, the fur wasn't as long, nowhere near as long, because it was actually a little bit warmer during this time. But it was very massive. And like I said, it looked like a giant's body with a gorilla head on it.
Yeah, I'm curious about the dogs. What was it trying to do to the dogs? Was it trying to kill the dogs? Is that why they brought you over?
We really don't know. He said something just kept messing with him. I don't know if it was just curious as to why the dogs were chained and tied up, or what. But that night that it hit the trailer, what we believe happened because the dog was gone, and then it come running around the trailer at us with the chain still hanging off of it. And we got to talking, and what me and my buddy believe is that, this thing was walking past the trailer heading towards the dogs. And we also wondered, because he said the dogs' food bowl, they would feed the dogs just raw food. They didn't feed them actual dog food. They'd throw out the bones, and then they'd throw out, chickens, and just feed them raw meat. And that's what these dogs ate. And he said they noticed that the food was gone. He said, and every time they'd go to feed the dogs and they were out there, that the dogs would act starved. And we wondered if if it was coming and taking the hunks of meat and the chickens and steaks, whatever they threw out, and was eating it. But we wondered that night if it had walked by the back of the house and the dog that was gone, if it jumped out and scared it, and that thing maybe jumped, and that's why it hit the trailer like it did, kind of a reaction of trying to get away. And then, but for some reason it took the dog, and then the dog let the dog go.
Yeah, that's terrifying, man. It's terrifying, especially what did your buddy think about the whole experience? Who he was there with you?
He was excited. I mean, he told me that I was a crazy fool the first time I told him about my first experience. And then after that night, he told me, he said, man, I'm a believer. He said, I should have listened to you the whole time. He said, I knew you couldn't make up a story like that. I said, well, it's kind of hard to make up a story like that. I mean, it really is. I told him, I said, I've got a good imagination, but it ain't that good. But after that, he got all excited, and I did too. And we went around telling people our story and asking people, have you all ever seen, But we talked about it for years. We still, to this day, every time we get together, we talk about that night.
Yeah, it's a fascinating account, man. It really is. I wanted to ask you about the smell. Do you think the smell was this thing just stinks, or do you think it's something it gives off? And I know you're speculating, and I'm just curious on your speculation.
I would almost say, it might be something that this thing was giving off, because it smelled very musky, very musky. And I don't know if it was going around trying to let off a smell, trying to, find a mate or something. I don't know. It could be why the thing was wandering as far as it did. But it was a smell that I had never smelled before. I mean, it would have been different if this thing had stunk. There's a difference between, wet fur and a smell that is created and secreted by an animal. But I almost wondered if it was the latter of those two.
Just kind of stunk on its own. Just kind of
Yeah.
I gotcha. Around that area, have you guys ever heard any vocals, you or your friend?
We occasionally, we would occasionally, and we've talked to other people, you could hear every once in a while, hear a hoop or a holler, but that's nothing normal. There's a bunch of rednecks that like to get drunk, so you're used to hearing a lot of hollering at night. But we did hear, I noticed a lot during that time, that you could hear a lot of tree knocks. If you stood still and listened, every once in a while you would hear a tree knock, and sometimes it was very rhythmic and other times it was not. Sometimes it was sporadic, and then, me and my buddy, we went out camping after that, and we tried to listen and see if we could hear anything else. And we stood still, never could find anything, but then every once in a while you'd hear a couple tree knocks, and we'd kind of take off in the direction of the tree knocks. We were trying to find another one, which probably wasn't smart to try to chase after a Bigfoot by ourselves, but.
Yeah, I hear you, though. Curiosity gets you sometimes. I'm convinced that huff that you heard is a acknowledgement, and I could be wrong. That's
Right.
just my theory, but I think when they huff or kind of blow at you, it's them acknowledging, you see me, I see you, now I'm leaving. Generally, they'll leave after they do that. They'll kind of huff at you and then turn around and leave. Did you take that as aggressive, or how did you take the huff when it huffed at you?
I never did feel that it was aggressive at all. I mean, I agree with you. I feel like it was like an acknowledgement, well, all right, I see you, you see me, I'm leaving now. And that's just honestly what I felt. I just felt like, it was just giving a huff real quick before it left. And
Yeah, I think it's interesting too about the dog. Thank God do you think it broke the chain of the dog that the dog was on, or do you think the dog was so scared it broke its own chain and took off?
we almost wondered if it broke the chain. I mean, because this was a pretty heavy-duty chain they had this dog on, because it had been known to break its own chain before. And he said that chain was about a year old and the dog had never got off of it yet. So, we really don't know. I almost wondered if it broke the chain, or, then again, if you're in a fight or flight response, you can do amazing things even if you are a dog. If you're trying to get away, you can break a chain if you're trying to, if you're that scared.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Has there been anything else that's happened around those properties or in that area since this happened? What, almost 9 years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know it was a while back, but I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. And my buddy still tells me that he can hear a lot of tree knocked up where he's at, still to this day, but never has seen anything. We do have people out here that have dogs go missing, that just will disappear. And, we do have a lot of coyotes too out here. And sometimes, sheep will be gone, dogs will be gone, cats. And a lot of times they'll contribute to just the coyotes going around and picking off the smaller prey. But I tell them I don't think so. I believe that it could be something else, just trying to survive. But I do remember one more incident over near my mom and dad's house that really, still to this day, really freaks me out. And I know it wasn't a Sasquatch, but I don't know what it was. Listening to your show, I hear a lot about the dog man, and it made me wonder if maybe it was something like that. But
yeah, tell me about that.
I was, like I said earlier, I'm a bit of a night owl, and I was working a night shift job at the time. And so as I was on my way home, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm out cruising, decide I'm going to go home by the river. And I'm driving down by the river. I go around a sharp curve. And there's a very sharp curve before you turn onto the river. And I'm just cruising. All my windows are down. I'm not even listening to any music. I'm just chilling, listening to the night. And all of a sudden, something come out of some bushes. There was a little hill there with some bushes on it. And it came out of nowhere and started chasing my car. Couldn't see what it was. It was just a solid black figure, but you could hear it breathing, and you can tell this thing was trying to catch me. And you could hear the claw marks on the ground. I could tell it was running on all fours. This thing was running full force, and I'm doing about 35, and this thing's catching up. So I gun it, and I get to about 45, and I noticed, I pulled away, and the only reason I knew I was pulling away was I could see eyes shine on this thing. This thing's eyes were glowing, just the reflection from my taillights. And I'm trying my best to see, and I can't see this thing. And it's chasing me. And, I know we've got mountain lions around where I live at, but have you ever heard about a mountain lion chasing a car like a dog?
Never once.
And this thing was chasing me. And, and I've got my windows down, and I left my windows down. I thought maybe I should roll them up in case it catches up, but I'm like, no, wait, I want to hear this thing if it gets close. And I just kept on going. I got close. I passed the road that I turned off to that I lived on, and I kept on going. And I drove for about 2 miles, and this thing still followed me. Running on the road, you could hear the claws digging into the concrete, and it was chasing me for every bit of what it could do. The odd thing that I thought was, we're close to where I was at. There's an old field that used to be an Indian campground. We used to have plow competitions where we'd take old draft horses out and old plows, and we'd go out there, and you can plow up the ground, and you can go and find tons of artifacts. We found shards of bowls. We found arrowheads. Somebody actually found remnants of what was an old Cherokee Indian tent out there. And then we had to quit doing that when we finally found bones we came across, and it was a small burial ground. And I get past this field, and as I'm passing the field, I all of a sudden noticed that this thing just turned off, and you can hear it take off running through the field. and it ran through that specific field, took off running for everything it had, and I just kept on going. And I was like, I'll take the long way home. And I didn't drive past the river or past that field for quite a while that night, during the, as long as it was night. I did it during the day. I went the next day to try to see if I could see anything, and I never could. But
yeah, that's terrifying, man. It makes you wonder what it was.
And I really don't know. And I don't know if it was something like the dog man or what. But I really don't know.
Yeah, your normal predators won't chase cars like that. I mean, no. In reality, a bear's not going to chase your car. A cougar's not going to chase your car. And you're doing 35, man, and this thing's keeping up. That's pretty terrifying. It's pretty ballsy, really, of this thing to come after you.
It really was. But, all I could tell was it was solid black. And I was like, at first I thought I was getting chased by a demon. I really did. I thought, this is a demon coming after me. I did a lot of praying during that car ride.
I bet. Do you remember what color the eyes were?
And they glowed, the eye shine was green. You could just tell that the reflection was greenish. So that's, in the tail lights that I could see. And I had a flashlight. I kept trying to shine back and see if I could spot anything, but all you could see was a green reflection. Yeah,
be careful out there. I do get dogman reports in Tennessee, believe it or not. I've heard many dogman reports in Tennessee, and I'm not sure what to think of the dogman, what that thing is. You know what I mean? I believe people run into it, but I couldn't tell you what it is. It seems to be physical for the most part.
Yeah, from what I could tell, this thing was a physical being because you could hear it. You could hear the claws scraping on the concrete.
You have to keep me up to date, man. I'm curious if the creatures are crossing your property, your parents' property, your buddy's property, in the, not migration, but, kind of a travel corridor.
Right. And it really was. It was, from the way it was going, it was heading east for sure. It was just traveling in the east direction. It was staying on a pretty good path. It was following the river. That's what I could tell you. It was just following the river.
Let me ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is, Jeff? What's your opinion?
In my honest opinion, as a God-fearing man, I believe it is a creature that God created. I believe it is flesh and bone. I believe it's one of those animals that was created that learned to evade humans, one of the smart creatures. But, I believe it was something that was created, back with Adam and Eve that roamed the earth with dinosaurs and everything. I believe that it is just it's a creature that it knows how to evade us. There's still to this day, scientists are still discovering new creatures, creatures that have been able to evade us this long. And, this is a highly intelligent creature, but I believe it's flesh and bone. And I just, other than that, I really don't know.
Yeah, would you say it's more primate-like, non-human primate, or would you say it's more human? When you say creature, I guess I'm curious on what your opinion on that is.
I would almost say more human-like. I would say more human-like than ape-like because it's, like I said, it's intelligent. It did walk upright on 2 feet. Bears can even walk upright on 2 feet, but something with intelligence, a bear doesn't have the intelligence this thing did. And I don't ever think there's been a primate that ever had intelligence like this thing did.
Yeah, it's so hard to try and figure out, isn't it? It is interesting, though, especially with its behavior of raising its hand and mimicking you when you're raising your hand. And they seem to watch hands. If you got a gun in your hand, you get a whole different reaction when you point it at it. And that's the other thing with the intelligence. Everyone I've ever talked to that's pointed a gun while he's said it knew right away. They assumed it knew right away what the whole body language changed, the whole atmosphere changed, and it knew what was going to happen next. So it is kind of weird. You put your hand up and it puts its hand up. And, they seem to mimic people's voices. Why wouldn't they mimic what you do? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. All I know is I hope I see one again. I hope I have my wife and my whole family with me when I do, so that way they all know I'm not crazy.
Yeah, you're definitely not crazy. They are seen. There's a lot of encounters in Tennessee. Like I said, you're definitely not crazy, but it's a fascinating account, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share it. I
thank you for allowing me to. I absolutely love your show, and I just want, if it's all right, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Dave. He's a big fan and listens to it all the time. But I appreciate you letting me come on here and talk about my experience. And it's nice to talk to somebody who believes me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks again, Jeff.
Hey, thank you.
Well, next up, I want to welcome Chris to the show. Chris, thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had an encounter in Kentucky. If you would, how long ago did this happen, Chris?
It was back around 2007.
2007. Well, if you would, walk us into it. Kind of what were you doing? And if you would, tell us what happened.
Well, I live in a really rural county in Kentucky. The majority of the space in the county is ate up by the Daniel Boone National Forest. Most properties back up to it and stuff. And me and my buddies got together about once a month, play poker, and you know how those nights go. They last a while. And I was leaving my buddy's house after a night of playing, and it was about 2:00 in the morning. I was walked out on his porch, and heading off the porch to my Jeep, and heard something in front of my Jeep. Now, from the porch to the tree line is about 15 yards, and the only thing in that 15 yards is the driveway. And my Jeep was sitting there, and I heard something move over there, and went to see what it was. I expected a deer or a raccoon or something, out here in the boonies, I guess. It could be anything. But when I looked over, I saw a black shape, and it was crouched down like a baseball catcher. Squatted down on its heels and, playing catcher for baseball there. And
Yeah.
when I looked over there, I saw it, and it stood up and looked my direction. I couldn't see any facial details or anything because the moon was behind it. Everything was backlit, but I could see the silhouette. It's about 7 foot, give or take a few inches. Real broad shoulders, real long arms, like hung down by its knees. We stood there, looked at each other for 7 seconds or so. It felt like hours, but it was just a few seconds, I guess. And then it blew at me, kind of like a, and it took off and ran off into the tree line.
Yeah, that's terrifying, man. What'd you do next? Did you drive off or did you run back in the house?
Well, I stood there for a second, and I thought, well, should I go back inside and let everybody know, or should I decided to go ahead and get in my Jeep and go home. The next day, I told my buddy, I was like, hey, I saw a Bigfoot outside your house. He's like, what? And I told him what happened. He just kind of looked at me funny, but that was about, he didn't question it too much.
Did your buddy ever say anything weird was going on around that property, or did he ever see anything?
There have been some, ghost stories and stuff up in that area, back in the hollers there, and stuff, but no one had ever seen anything like that before. But, he didn't really question it or scoff at it or anything. He just kind of went on with his day. Didn't really question it, did he?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It makes me wonder if it was kind of peeking in. I mean, I'm speculating at this point, but I wonder if it was peeking in, watching you guys play poker. And then, when guys play poker, there's drinking and people are talking. And
yeah, we had music going and stuff. I kind of, since it's happened, looking back on it all this time, I've kind of thought maybe it was a juvenile because it was slimmer than I was expecting it to be, than I would have expected it to be. It wasn't as, it wasn't like Harry and Henderson, bulky, huge. It was more slender. And I thought maybe it was curious, trying to figure out what's going on. And then I kind of surprised it by seeing it, I think.
Do you think it was running over to get behind your Jeep because it heard you coming out? Or, I mean, obviously you're speculating and I am too, but it seems kind of weird it would be over in that area. You know what I mean? Like, why didn't it just take off?
I don't know I don't know what it was doing, but where the Jeep is, the Jeep was, the driveway, it runs parallel to the tree line. And like I said, it's about 15 yards from the porch to the tree line. And then and the driveway is the only thing there, but the driveway is on the side of the tree line. So it's from the driveway to the tree line is probably 4 feet, 5 feet.
So
it's pretty close to the tree line.
Yeah, it is really close. So were you in your Jeep when you looked up and you saw it, or were you just getting into the Jeep?
Actually, I just stepped off the porch. I was walking to my Jeep.
Oh, I gotcha. That's kind of a bad position to be in.
It was, it was surprising to say the least, trying to think of the right word here. I wasn't really afraid, like, oh, this thing's going to get, I was just like, what in the hell am I looking at? Kind of shocked, I guess would be the right word.
Yeah, the huff that you heard, what was your interpretation of that huff?
Like a road drive, I kind of got the feeling it was saying, don't follow me in these woods, asshole. I'm out of here, don't follow me.
Yeah. I don't know. That huff, and you were there. I mean, you got to see it firsthand, so I can only go off your impression. But I'm telling you, from a lot of encounters I've listened to, I really think that huff is an acknowledgement, kind of that blow huff sound that you hear. A lot of hunters I've talked to, a lot of people hiking, a lot of times when they huff like that, then they'll leave. And I almost wonder if it's some sort of weird acknowledgement, like you see me, I see you, now I'm leaving. Could have been don't follow me too. Who knows? You know what I mean?
I mean, that makes sense. But I mean, it didn't act aggressive or anything. It was just, like I said, I think I kind of surprised it. I think it didn't feel that I could see it when I looked that direction. Like it thought it was hidden or something. But I think it was a surprise that I saw it as I was surprised to see it.
What'd you think of Bigfoot Sasquatch prior to seeing this thing?
I'd always been interested in a little bit of everything when I was a kid. My grandmother got me this Time Life series called Mysteries of the Unknown or something. Books had like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and frogs raining out of the sky. So any kind of weird stuff I'd always been interested in, but I'd never really put a whole lot of thought into it. If something was on, I'd watch it, or just kind of interested in any kind of thing unusual. UFOs, alien, Bigfoot, Loch Ness, just whatever. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I'll check that out. But I never really put much thought into, do I think this stuff is running around out there?
Yeah, I find that interesting. In Kentucky, a lot of people say that, where they'll say, I didn't think it was out here or down here, however you want to position yourself. But they always think it's off on the West Coast, off in the Washington State. I think more goes on in Kentucky than in Washington State, if you want my honest opinion. And I think there's a lot more weird things down there in Kentucky that you guys have that we don't have. That's just my opinion, but they're definitely down there. I hear a lot of people talk about them. A lot of people that live out in the country and stuff talk about them all the time. What do you think that they are, Chris? What's your opinion?
I think they're flesh and blood. I think they're some kind of creature. I don't think they're interdimensional. I know the orbs and stuff people are reporting now and all that stuff, but I think it was a creature of flesh and blood, and but I don't think it was like a wild animal like a bear or a cougar or something. I think there was a certain kind of intelligence to it. I think they have they're intelligent, curiosity and curious and stuff, but I don't think it's they get dropped off by ET and I don't discount anything. It's just not what I think.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, what you saw was very physical, and if it could have jumped in a portal, it would have jumped in a portal. But it didn't. It ran off. But there is weird things that go on. I mean, I say that half jokingly. There is weird things that go on with Sasquatch, but I think a lot of people who have encounters like you, Chris, or even like myself, they seem very physical. They seem like somewhere between a person and an ape. That weird. They are smarter than your average animal, though. I think any other predator or prey would have bolted the minute you stepped outside of that door. They wouldn't have waited. They wouldn't have squatted down like this thing did. So, I mean, you're right. There's definitely an intelligence to them. Yeah,
like I said, I think it thought it was hidden well enough that I wouldn't see it into the shadows and stuff. But they seem intelligent. Like there's something there. They're aware, I guess.
Have you ever gone back to your friend's property and just kind of looked around?
Yeah, actually, it's, I still go. Well, he don't live there anymore, but been there many times. Was probably there the next night. Been there more times than I can count. I've hunted that property, not seen anything. He did call me one night saying he heard something screaming up in the woods, but where we live, it could be a bobcat or some kind of big cat up there. That wouldn't be unheard of. But yeah, it's never, it didn't stop me from going into the woods or anything.
Yeah, I understand. It's a fascinating account, though. At least you got a chance to see one and kind of see how quickly they can move, too, from a standing position. I'm for sure it was a blink of an eye and this thing was gone. Yeah,
it was. And it always amuses me when people say, well, you probably just saw a bear, or you probably just misidentified something, or you probably just, I've seen bears in the woods. I know what a bear looks like. It wasn't a bear. Or they'll say, were you all drinking? You probably, we weren't drunk. And I've never seen anybody so drunk that they just randomly see Bigfoot running around.
Yeah, it's so true, man. It's so true. I always laugh at that argument, or people say, what were you smoking?
Yeah.
It's like, marijuana doesn't really make you see Bigfoot. I'm sorry to hate to break it to you, but
it's not like, I was so tore up I saw Bigfoot last night. That's not the way it works. I've never.
No. It's so true, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Chris, and sharing the encounter, taking the time to tell us what happened to you. Thank you again.
I appreciate it, man. I was glad to do it.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
Intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself, let me drown